Welcome everybody, and may I start by saying what a great Navy Day it is. I would like to acknowledge one person in particular in the audience, and that's Admiral Robinson, Royal Australian Navy retired, 94, about to hit 95 years of age. Sir, could you please stand up? What an unbelievable stalwart, not just for this Navy and the Defence Force, but for the defence of this country, sir, and I salute you for your many, many decades, scores of years of service to this nation. I would like also to congratulate one of our presenters, and that's Admiral Muhammad Ali, who is about to be appointed the Commander of the First Fleet of the Indonesian Navy. Sir, thank you, well done. So for those of you that attended the first presentation, you'll note that the Minister pointed out that the region is undergoing the most significant geopolitical change since World War II, and this is probably no more evident than the Indo-Pacific. And I would like just to touch upon some of the activities that the Royal Australian Navy are doing right now to deal with those challenges. Now, we Navy, as a Navy, spend about 6,000 days at sea, and over a third of those are spent deployed into the region. I've given my commanding officers specific instructions that when they leave Sydney Harbour, they are forbidden using starboard wheel and they must turn to port to head north. As I speak, our Navy has 21 ships at sea. Our submarine Sato is in Japan. Our Pacific Surface Action Group, the PAC-SAG, comprising Hobart, Parramatta and Stewart, are en route to Japan. Our tanker Sirius is operating in the Southeast Asia. Our survey ships Benalla and Shepparton are berthed in Port Moresby. Our mine hunters Gascoyne and Diamantina are heading towards Busan for a mine warfare exercise, and they will transit further and longer than any Australian mine hunter has done in 75 years. Our newest ship, our destroyer Brisbane, is operating off the west coast of the US. Our survey ship, larger one, Lewin, has left Australian waters. And next week, our large amphibious ship, Adelaide, with a mine hunter, Huon, and a diving team, will deploy to the region for Operation Render Safe. You will never hear our ships sound 3 short blasts. Today, we are blessed to have 7 eminent speakers gathered here, all leaders, all maritime experts who have a unique view of the Indo-Pacific. Leading the panel will be the Honourable Alex Hawke, the Minister for International Development and the Pacific and the Australian Assistant Minister for Defence. And after which, we will hear from the commanders of Fiji, France, the United States, India, Indonesia and Japan. Together, their fleets operate across the expanse of the Indo-Pacific. Their ships, aircraft and submarines manoeuvre throughout the region with unity of purpose, and exactly as the Australian Chief of Navy mentioned before, we operate in partnership with them. They've all travelled great distances to be here, and gentlemen and sirs, I thank you for your efforts in being here today to lend us your expertise. Can I implore everyone in the room to lend me your ears, to listen to what they have to say. You will hear differences in tone and nuances in content, but underpinning their messages will be those same fundamentals that Alfred Mahan expressed 130 years ago, and they've been mentioned in this auditorium numerous times in the last 2 hours. Free trade, rules-based global order, stability, security, prosperity of the region, freedom of ideas. As they say, the more things change, the more they stay the same. So on that note, it does give me great pleasure to introduce our first speaker, the Assistant Minister for Defence, a minister who has taken up his duties and his responsibilities with gusto and excellence. Sir, may I invite you to the podium.
Well, firstly, thank you to the Fleet Commander, Rear Admiral Mead, for that kind introduction and those words. It's a real privilege to be here today with all of you to say a few brief opening remarks to this important session that I think will be very interesting to all of us. I want to begin by acknowledging the traditional custodians of the land on which we meet, the Gadigal people of the Eora Nation, and pay my respect to their elders, past, present and emerging. I'd also like to pay my respect to the Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander service people, the men and women over the years who have contributed so much to our nation's defence, and service personnel in times of war and peace. And I want to thank all of you for being here today, especially as Rear Admiral Mead said, our Navy, the Australian Navy, the Royal Australian Navy. We're very proud of our Navy, we're proud of our service personnel, we're proud of its history, and we're proud of the job you're doing for us all around the world as a government and as a people, keeping our nation's interests safe and keeping the international order intact. So thank you for your service. It's a great privilege to be here with this eminent panel today to introduce this session of the Sea Power Conference, views from the north, south, east and west. And I think when you think about that, that is what is most important about this conference, the partnerships that we have with these important countries that are represented here today, the relationships that you've all formed with each other and that we form as joint navies around the world, and the view that people do have of the Pacific, the work that they're doing all through the Pacific. Our partnerships are what is most important to us here in Australia, the partnerships we're forming indeed to make sure that the international order is upheld. I think, as you know, the geopolitical environment is becoming more complex in the Pacific. All of the economies that you see in our region are growing, they're prosperous, and as they grow and as they prosper, of course, more investment in defence, more investment in naval capability in particular is occurring rapidly. In our white paper, of course, I think we articulated well that Australia's defence spending is high, but Asia's defence spending is now more than Europe, and the trend for increased spending has continued. We see nations in the Indo-Pacific spending over $507 billion US compared to about $364 billion in European nations. And of course, in the broader Indo-Pacific region during the next 2 decades, we know that half of the world's submarines will operate here, and many of these submarines, significantly, will be new and modern designs armed with anti-ship cruise missiles, wire-guided and wake-homing torpedoes and anti-ship mines. And the Australian government's very committed to our investment in our submarine program, a huge investment in submarines from Australia's perspective. As a result of this modernisation of our military and the military in the region, I think we see a larger number of forces in the Indo-Pacific able to operate at greater range, with more precision, and especially in the maritime environment. And that's what I think makes this session so interesting that we're going to have right now with these gentlemen here. On the stage, of course, are 6 naval leaders. They look at the Indo-Pacific from very different vantage points, and yet we all have a similar vantage point on our region and on our world. These perspectives necessarily guide the decisions they'll make in leading their navies. I personally am looking very much forward to hearing from them about that because, and I'm going to stay for this entire session, because all of our defence ministers are here for this Sea Power Conference in Australia, and all of us learn from the experience and the depth of knowledge from these heads of navies from important partner countries that we see on stage with us today. I'm particularly looking forward to hearing from Admiral Jain about how India is engaging with the region, and our Prime Minister announced just last week in his Lowy address on foreign policy that we will have a state visit with Prime Minister Modi of India in January next year, and our partnerships with India are continuing. From Fiji's Navy Chief, Captain Tawaki, about the Fijians Navy ability to manage their large maritime domain and protect, of course, the vital resources that Fiji has in our seas. And we're also going to hear from Indonesia, France, Japan and the US, all of whom bring their experience and perspective and their partnerships that we value here in Australia. From our part, of course, you know we are a maritime nation and we are of the Indo-Pacific. We've got the Pacific Ocean, the ocean that is the focus of our Step Up and our government Step Up. And you'll see our partners around the world delivering their own versions of a step up into the Pacific. Everyone understands in today's day and age the importance of the Pacific, the geopolitical importance, the economic importance and the strategic importance of the Pacific to the world. Our Defence Minister, of course, recently said in Perth that it is the Indo-Ocean, of course, on the other side, that also defines our security and economic outlook. And we know for Australia and Australia's future, the security of the Indian Ocean is, of course, paramount to us. I want to give you just a few brief examples of the work we're doing, and then we're going to hand over to these Chiefs of Navy to hear from them about the important experience they bring here today. You might know with just the countries we have here on stage that Australia and Indonesia, for example, share a long history of bilateral relations, but our relationship is particularly strong and productive right now. We have a shared long maritime boundary in the Indian Ocean, and we've got a long, active bilateral association on maritime exercises. We've encouraged cooperation with our mutual partners, and we have so many security exercises, Kakadu and Komodo, and we, of course, value that partnership with Indonesia as our nearest neighbour in a maritime sense. Our relationship from India I've spoken about, but it continues to go from strength to strength. The scale and complexity of this year's bilateral Navy exercise with India, AUSINDEX, saw our navies undertake anti-submarine warfare exercises together, our P8s flying coordinated missions in the Bay of Bengal, demonstrating, of course, great cooperation and trust. And we have a long, long history of working alongside France and the United States in the Pacific. And in May, we saw the first iteration of the French-led maritime exercise La Pérouse in the Indian Ocean, which included vessels from France, Japan and the United States. And I think when you think about our defence industry cooperation with France that is coming on, and also President Macron visiting next year into our region of the Pacific, we have great engagement with France. Fiji, of course, is a long-time Pacific Patrol Boat Program partner. And this partnership will continue with the provision of the new Guardian-class patrol boats, where I think we're up to 6 out of 21 rolling off. And, of course, they're fantastic new boats. And the 21 patrol boats that we'll see gifted into our region will enhance country and partner security and their ability to police their maritime areas. Our Vuvale partnership, which was just announced with the Prime Minister of Fiji, of course, we'll see an enhanced partnership between Australia and Fiji in years to come. It was signed in Canberra just last month, and this week the Prime Minister and I are off to Fiji to further enhance our cooperation at the end of this week. And of course, as I look inside the exhibitions and I visit the stalls around, I see the huge opportunities that we have for partnership between our industries, not just our countries. The industry partnerships that are built between partner industry engagement, I think, is huge. And we look to all of the panellists here, to those industry partners, north, east, south and west, to sort of share their perspectives and experiences on the Indo-Pacific, the region that we all share. So I just want to say again to the Chief of Navy, to the Fleet Commander, I want to join every single one of the panellists here in welcoming you to Australia. As I said, every single one of Australia's Defence Ministers has come to this forum today. I'm here to listen and hear from you. We value the partnerships we have with each of you and your partner countries and your navies. The cooperation we have is outstanding, and we really thank you for the spirit and the great cooperation that you approach our mutual defence and strategic interests in the Indo-Pacific. Welcome to all of you, and I really look forward to a great session and hearing from all of you.
Ladies and gentlemen, just before we get started with Captain Tawaki, a reminder that if you'd like to ask questions for the Q&A session at the end, you need to use the social media through the app or through Twitter. Thank you.
I must thank the Honourable Minister for those kind words of introduction, and Admiral Mead for the kind introduction this morning, this afternoon. Your Excellencies, colleagues, ladies and gentlemen, first and foremost, I must take this opportunity to thank the Sea-Power Centre and Admiral Noonan for the invitation to attend and speak at this Sea-Power conference. My presentation and comments this morning is based on Fiji's perspective on sea power in the 21st century, Indo-Pacific, a regional overview of the Southwest Pacific, its maritime environment, security challenges, and its mitigating efforts for regional maritime forces, while it's underpinning the importance of free, open, and sustainable maritime order based on the rule of law. The view presented this afternoon is from an operational perspective as a doer myself. The concept of Open Indo-Pacific, or FOIP, was first floated by Prime Minister Abe to regional leaders in 2016. It was viewed as the beginning of an intensified Japanese and US foreign policy of its proactive involvement in global affairs by establishing trans-border connectivity corridors. FOIP was designed to connect the Asian and African continents as well as the Indian and Pacific Oceans, including the Southwest Pacific region. The aim was to maintain and strengthen a rule-based and open maritime order to prevent instability and conflict, specifically avoiding any one country's dominance in the maritime domain on the Indo-Pacific, thus gave birth to the Indo-Pacific strategy and its economic and security objectives. This was followed by Trump's reiteration of the Indo-Pacific strategy, and the rest is history. As large ocean states, developing states in the Pacific, our priorities are underpinned by security and the sanctuary of the oceans and its resources as the basis of daily livelihood, either by sustenance, commerce, and economic reasons. Coincidentally, and worth mentioning, is the Chinese One Belt, One Road economic initiative that has been projected and included the Pacific, either through grants or loans, that has shaped the regional political landscape. The support for infrastructure projects, roads, wharves, airports, building can be witnessed in most Pacific Islands countries today. Educational support in universities, technical schools, and professional development programs in mainland China has developed and empowered national human capacity, institutional strengthening in governance, commerce, law enforcement are also key areas incorporated into this program. Having mentioned these two strategies, it is viewed that these are the influencing factors that will shape how sea power, or navies for that matter, are projected in my region. I will highlight this further in the presentation. Great U.S. Navy maritime strategist Alfred Mahan emphasized the importance of sea power, dominance, and influence as the key to national security. The notion is true in every aspect as experienced by small island developing states in the Pacific. The Southwest Pacific region and its oceans are vast, and it has huge resources and potential. As developing island states, we depend on the oceans for our daily sustenance and livelihood. The communities within our islands are mostly coastal communities and rely on the oceans as a lifeline to security, prosperity, and economic development. As developing states, most of our goods and services are transported through the dedicated sea lanes of communication. Our economies relies on the oceans, its resources, and its related maritime-related activities, such as the blue economy. The task is to ensure that these national security lifelines at community, national and regional level remain safe, secure, and unhindered. The Pacific Ocean is 1/3 of the world's oceans, and our challenges are common across the region, as highlighted on the slide. As large ocean states, our Navy's challenges are maritime-based and similar to any other small island developing states. Our challenges have been maritime-focused not by choice, but by the mere fact of our geography, environment, and history. Enormous efforts have been made to improve and enhance governance through strategic alliance and the need for international rule-based order and best practices. Non-traditional threats continue to be a part of our challenge due to the lack of capacity and capability of island states to consistently enforce, monitor, and detect maritime activities or made aware of activities within its maritime domain. Having highlighted those challenges, the region's priority areas are addressing issues associated to climate change, managing illegal, unreported or unrelated fishing, addressing maritime-based transnational crime, enhancing maritime security initiative partnership, the need to conduct maritime regular joint surveillance and enforcement operations, in addition to the regional FFA coordinated operations, enhancing regional surveillance agreements, enhancing capability and capacity in responding to HIDR and disaster operations. For small islands developing states, climate change remains to be our biggest challenge. From a maritime perspective, it would be prudent to highlight key issues emanating from sea level rise to the impact that is not addressed in UNCLOS in its current state. Firstly, maritime sovereignty, when islands are fully submerged due to the sea level rise. Secondly, the question of maritime boundaries, baselines, and its concerns and how this would be addressed under international convention. Thirdly, at national level, the impact of coastal inundation and sea level rise resulting in displacement, relocation, and migration of coastal communities to safer locations or safe haven. At international level, the cross-border state migration and the challenges it brings. Finally, the harvesting of fisheries and mineral resources when some of the sovereign island states will be underwater in the future. The big question, how do we deal with it? In mitigating most of these challenges, Southwest Pacific, I wish to highlight significant efforts in international collaboration, cooperation, and partnership. In Palm 8 in Japan, the free and open Indo-Pacific strategy and the capacity building in maritime safety and law enforcement was highlighted. The commitments, although not fully realized as yet, reassure small island states that their concerns for safety and security are recognized. In combating non-traditional threats and challenges, certain regional instruments such as the Niue Treaty Subsidiary Agreement, Shipwright Agreement, and the International Port State Measures Agreement are avenues of combating IUU and other related maritime crime, including transnational crime. The support efforts of the Royal New Zealand Navy in assisting Fiji in its maritime surveillance and enforcement in Operation Wasa Wasa in 2017 and 2018 indicate that such collaboration can be leveraged within the region. The Pacific Startup Strategy by Australia, through strengthening relations under the PMSP, continue to set a benchmark for bilateral and multilateral security arrangements in the region. As small island developing states in the Pacific, our paramount interest is our national security, the safety, well-being of our people. Our economies are small, at times fragile, challenged, and at most times dependent on strategic partnership in protecting our island nations. At this juncture, it's worth mentioning and acknowledging the Australian Pacific Maritime Security Program, which has gifted the Pacific patrol boats and now the improved Guardian patrol boats, including its follow-on support. These capabilities have provided us the adequate level of surveillance, enforcement, and rapid response capability to deal with a wide range of maritime operations, including HIDR. Ideally, I recommend some more. The need to obtain real-time surveillance information from air and surface platforms that can be analyzed and fused into reliable information to deter and protect the region. The region must invest in sustainable and cost-effective technology to be better appraised of its maritime domain. Alfred Mahan's notion of sea power production, of capable fleet, dominance, and influence are still quite relevant today. The security, the Indo-Pacific Partnership championed by the Quads and the Chinese Belt and Road Initiative will continue to influence the region through its respective programs. Each sovereign small island state will determine its own requirements to cater for its national security needs and infrastructure development. Coincidentally, it is my view that at operational and technical level, these influences or impacts are all connected to the oceans, and it must be managed diligently and professionally and in the nation's best interest. Non-traditional security threats and climate change have an impact in the collective efforts of the region, of the regional small island developing states to be a stable, safe, and secure region. The need to better manage our strategic relationships with major powers is critical, and I hope that they understand each Pacific nation's interests and priorities. As a large ocean state with small economies, we would want the Indo-Pacific, and in particular the Southwest Pacific, to be a shared space and not a contested one. In closing, the region will continue to be an area of interest within the Indo-Pacific region. It will continue to be dynamic and with various maritime-related activities. The region's collective effort is needed. Partnership, collaboration, and dialogue is a requirement for a stable, secure, and safe region. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen.
Thank you, Captain Tuaki. I'd now like to invite Admiral Prazok, the Chief of Navy of France. Thank you, sir.
Thank you. So I'm Admiral Christophe Prazok. I'm the head of the French Navy. And it has been a pleasure to travel halfway around the world to meet our inspiring host, Admiral Mike Noonan, and to try to explain why France is, to almost everybody's surprise, an Indo-Pacific nation, despite a 9-hour jet lag. I'm going to try to do so by first explaining why the Indo-Pacific matters so much to France, and second, why I believe the French Navy is central in maintaining this interest. So why Indo-Pacific matters to us as a country? It is an enormous region with global implications. It is clearly stated as a French government priority, and this has been confirmed by President Macron in his speech at Garden Island in Sydney a year ago. And yet, this sounds paradoxical for many reasons, at least 3. First paradox, mainland France appears very far away, apart from a number of tiny islands scattered around the region. And yet, these islands generate 93% of our exclusive economic zone. And yet, the region is home to a population of 1.5 million French citizens. And yet, more than 70% by value of our imports travel across the region. Security of these vital arteries has a direct relationship with our country's prosperity. And yet, French trade heavily relies on the 7,000 subsidiary companies. And yet, even outside these islands, 150,000 French expatriates have settled in the area. Second paradox, why are we interested in the situation in the South China Sea or the North Korea nuclear issue? We are not even neighbors. True, but we are a committed player in the international rules-based order. We are a member of the United Nations Security Council. We have jurisdiction over the second biggest EEZ. Therefore, we are concerned every time the international norms are broken or threatened or even undermined, especially in the maritime domain. And that is true regarding state actors, but also non-state actors like drug traffickers or pirates. That's why we, like the Royal Australian Navy and many other Navy represented in this room, chase drug traffickers in the Indian Ocean, even when their cargo is not bound for France or their crew not French, just because we want the international law upheld. My third paradox is that I am thousands of miles away, but I very often respond to natural disasters all the way across the globe. First, because we care. Mainland France is not situated within the intertropical convergence zone, where most cyclones happen. Mainland France is not situated within a ring of fire, where the likelihood of earthquakes is greater, but we care. This is why, in the recent decades, we sent ships and first aiders to Indonesia, to Vanuatu, but also to Central America, to Pakistan, to Burma, to Mozambique, to the Bahamas. Secondly, because we are neighbors. We are neighbors to vulnerable countries in the Caribbean. We are neighbors to vulnerable countries in the South Pacific. We are neighbors to vulnerable countries in the Western Indian Ocean. And thirdly, because we can. We have the first response units in all 5 continents and larger ships deployable from Toulon, mainland France, and I'll get back to that in a minute. I hope that by now I have already managed to persuade you that the vast majority of this concern are by and large maritime. I'm now going to explain how, in practical terms, the French Navy is involved in tackling these issues. The French Navy in the Indo-Pacific, what am I talking about? We have 5 main French naval establishments in the Indo-Pacific region. 3 naval bases on French territory, in La Réunion Island in the Indian Ocean, New Caledonia, and Tahiti. There you have, in very broad terms, in each territory, 1 frigate, like Vendémiaire. Many of you heard of Vendémiaire last year. And 2 OPVs, and 1 light supply ship, and a couple of reconnaissance aircraft. 2 bases on foreign soil, in Djibouti and Abu Dhabi. There is no high-end warship permanently based there. However, there is always at least 1 major warship, a frigate or a destroyer, deployed in the northern Indian Ocean. In addition, 3 to 6 major warships per year pass through the Far East. Can be frigates or destroyers, can be the Charles de Gaulle, like earlier this year during the exercise C'est la Pérouse, can be an LHA, like Mistral in 2017. The issues of the region require presence and intervention. Presence because we need to know the area. We need to know the key actors. We need to know their habits, their behaviors. We need to know the patterns of life, the usual fishing zones, the usual commercial routes, the weather, the sea state during the monsoon, or the shipping density. We need to patrol. We need to show the flag and deter the bad guys in our immense EEZ. As I routinely say, if it's not controlled, it is bound to be pillage. If it's pillage, it's bound to be occupied. If it's occupied, it will then be contested. The second action is intervention. Those challenges I have listed earlier require 2 levels of response. A layer of primary responders. For example, when a hurricane hits Vanuatu, we can send a light aircraft or a helicopter to help conduct initial damage assessment, and perhaps a light supply ship to bring essential aid such as water and medics. Then, as we did last year in Mozambique with LHA Tonnerre, the heavyweight reinforcements can be deployed coming from mainland France with thousands of tons of aid, trucks, troops, etc. The same logic applies if our sovereignty is contested somewhere, where the international law is challenged somewhere, or if a major crisis develops. For instance, in August 1990, the first French ship to enter the Arabic Gulf when Kuwait was invaded was a French corvette based in Djibouti. 6 months later, we had 2 carrier groups engaged in Operation Desert Storm. Of course, the balance between presence and intervention, between light vessels and major warships, between manned and unmanned also, requires fine-tuning and regular analysis. This is part of my job as the head of the French Navy. So in a nutshell, the Indo-Pacific is important to France Firstly, because we are a riparian nation. Secondly, because we depend so much on it for security and prosperity. And thirdly, because of some vital elements of the common heritage of mankind, be it international law or the environment, are most critically under threat here. Our naval presence in the region is quite significant and increasing, because most of the issues we're facing here have either a maritime root cause, like commercial routes or illegal fishing, or maritime symptoms, like challenges to the international order. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you, Admiral Prozak. I'd now like to invite Admiral Aquilino, the Commander, US Pacific Fleet. Sir.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Minister Hawke, please pass my regards to Minister Reynolds. Ladies and gentlemen, and lastly to my friend Mike Noonan. I am privileged and honored to be asked to come. Mike, thank you very much. It's wonderful that you've pulled this amazing event together, and it's even better for me to come back to Australia and to see so many friends from across the globe in my 35 years of being in the U.S. Navy. So friends from the Northern Atlantic, from the Mediterranean, from Europe, from the Middle East, and the many friends that I've been lucky enough to make here in the Indo-Pacific. It is truly wonderful to be here and to catch up with each and every one of you. Thank you. Mike, lastly, I'd like to thank you for your personal dedication to the collective security of the region. Together, the people in this room all have benefited from and must insist upon a free and open Indo-Pacific. Your personal commitment and that as of Australia has been noticed and welcomed by my nation each and every time. So we have been linked at the hip for many, many, many years, and I thank you for that dedication to security and prosperity across the region. You've clearly identified that a strong Navy is irreplaceably fundamental to my country, your country, and the rest of the nations in the region's maritime security. Thank you for that. For all the nations, particularly here in the South Pacific, we all remain committed to the constellation of allies and partners that has been and remains the surest guarantor of national sovereignty, and security, and prosperity. We truly are all stronger together. Today I've been asked to speak about the view from the north. But before I start, I'd like to frame a little bit of my worldwide view. We are quickly approaching the 75th anniversary since the end of World War II. In the decades since, nations large and small have benefited from the free and open Indo-Pacific. Before this period of extended prosperity, nations from America to the Southwest Pacific Islands have suffered belligerence, uncertainty, and at times paid with their lives. Our navies and nations have clearly invested and lost both blood and treasure. The one lesson was clear. No single nation who calls the Pacific Ocean home can or should dictate terms to others in the region. Now, as the Pacific Fleet Commander, in the U.S. National Defense Strategy, I face 4 of the 5 identified threats that exist. And my national security strategy is a maritime strategy. Additionally, as you review those threats, the stakes are high. We here today have a fundamental divergence of values with 2 incompatible visions of the future. Now, to be clear, our goal is to maintain a free and open Indo-Pacific, alongside a constellation of like-minded allies and partners, where all nations, large and small, are safe, secure, sovereign, and prosperous. The Indo-Pacific Commander, Admiral Davidson, as his maritime component, has asked me to deliver three things. First, we have to be ready to fight and win the high-end war. Now, that said, we are not here to start a fight. Therefore, second, we must operate every day to win without fighting. That means lethal naval combat power pushed forward each and every day to deter our adversaries. And third, we must maintain and sustain that ready force. Now, with these three areas in mind, I've done an assessment of what is the view from the north. And from where I sit, that view is very promising. And let me explain why. First, all of the nations here are increasingly interoperable. Joint Strike Fighters, Super Hornets, Growlers, P-8s, and that list names only a few. We all share many of those lethal combat platforms, and those that are not in that list are also interoperable across our nations. Operating and exercising in realistic settings is returning dividends. We exercise and operate together every day with familiarity. There have been a parade of significant bilateral, multilateral exercise, naming just a few: Annulex, Keen Sword, Key Resolve, All the Carrots, Malabar, Cockadoo, and most recently, Talisman Sabre. I'll highlight the 36 ships and more than 25,000 sailors from Australia, Canada, Japan, and New Zealand, focusing on dynamic maneuvering, elevated command and control, and that didn't even mention India and South Korea as initial observing nations. As allies and partners, we're growing stronger. Planning is well underway for the next Rim of the Pacific exercise. Last year, 2 years ago, 26 nations. This year, approaching 30 nations. All will participate in this biannual exercise. The number of nations grows, and all would like to be a part of the solution in sustaining a free and open Indo-Pacific. Lastly, we believe in, rely on each other, being ready at the moment's notice, whether for HADR or for high-end operations. The vast majority of the nations here are investing in a winning approach by working together. So the commitment we have to each other, the continued readiness, the interoperability, the warfighting lethality, all of those lead me to be encouraged. It's that spirit of cooperation with our navies that underscores the international imperative of resisting coercion and intimidation. Falling victim to short-sighted, short-lived predatory payoffs is cost prohibitive. We respect and value our Southwest Pacific Island partner nations, committed to mutual interest by sustaining our collective security. I fully support the work that Mike Noonan is doing here with the Royal Australian Navy, and reviewing both the capacity and capability necessary to meet the rising tide of challenges in the Indo-Pacific. My nation is doing the same. Investing in 21st century frigates, attack submarines in sufficient numbers with the sailors to go to sea will benefit the free and open Indo-Pacific. Now, no nation here is immune from competing domestic priorities. We must all keep our nations focused on the imperative of the individual and our collective security. Remaining steadfast in developing and fielding credible, ready naval combat power is essential in safeguarding security. Presence matters. And for the U.S., we are here to stay. Now, any of the nations out here can surge forces. None, however, can surge trust and cooperation. That comes from the many events that I described before, all of which we do together each and every day. We have built that trust for more than a century of commitment here. We will continue to build that strength with any nation, large or small, with common values for decades to come. Together, our naval forces fought and died together in places like the Sunda Strait, Coral Sea, Savo Island, and that list goes on. In the 7 decades since those dark days, we've proven that stability, fairness, and peace are in every nation's interest. Through shared adversity, we've developed an abiding confidence in each other, a mutual respect for one another's capabilities and cultures, and our trust in one another is rock solid. There is no doubt that nations who have embraced the international rules-based order have shared in that prosperity and will continue to do so. And with that, Mike, once again, thank you very much for inviting me today. Thanks for pulling the great team here together, and I look forward to any questions after. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Admiral Aquilino. So I'd now like to invite Vice Admiral Jain, who is the Flag Officer Commanding-in-Chief, Eastern Naval Command, India. Thank you, sir.
Minister Hawke, Vice Admiral Noonan, Chief of Navy, Australia, Chiefs of Navy, senior officers, ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon. I'm the 4th speaker of this session, and I find there is 100% convergence of views on this very important topic. So you'll find something very similar views what my predecessors have spoken, but I'll try to put across them in my country's perspective, how India sees Indo-Pacific. India's views on Indo-Pacific are predicated on one basic fact, that is, India is a maritime nation. Secondly, seas and oceans, they belong to all. History shows that share links of our ancient Indian civilization with nations across the region, from Korea in the east to Egypt on the west and beyond, facilitated vibrant trade and cultural relations with people across this expanse. All this had made Indian subcontinent immensely prosperous. Today, the region is once again the engine of global economic growth. The government of India has complete strategic coherence on the importance of Indo-Pacific region in the sustenance of our economic growth and prosperity. This is an imperative, as 90% of India's trade by volume and 70% by value is by sea, supported by 1,399 Indian-flagged merchantmen and about 150,000 seafarers. Out of this, around 40% of our trade transits through South China Sea and Malacca Strait. We therefore seek a peaceful and secure neighborhood and the Indo-Pacific region. As stated by India's External Affairs Minister, Mr. Jaishankar, recently, the Indo-Pacific is not against any nation or entity. Rather, it is a concept born out of a convergence of shared interest aimed at peace, security, stability, prosperity, and rules. In this regard, in 2015, Prime Minister Modi had articulated our vision in one word, Sagar, which means ocean in Hindi, and is acronym for security and growth for all in the region. This is the guiding principle in all our endeavors and is being implemented through the country's Act East policy. We seek to work with all stakeholders to evolve a common rule-based order for the region which respects sovereignty, territorial integrity, equality of all nations, irrespective of their size and strength. Of course, in a realistic world, there is a growing competition amongst nations, which is a natural extension of individual national interest. However, this competition, if conducted in a principled manner with respect to the core ideals of international order, can unlock the immense untapped potential of the region for the benefit of the entire world. Today, economic, political, and technological power is more distributed around the world than ever before. This process is accompanied by the weakening of established rules, a change in the character of global economy, and the rise of disruptive technologies. These shifts in global power have shaken the very foundations of the world order. Apart from these global trends, we are also faced with local challenges within the Indo-Pacific. Unsettled claims, unresolved disputes, clashing visions, and competing models have all added to the growth of uncertainty. Most countries in the region are developing countries having huge working population. Their growing aspirations require large-scale developmental efforts by respective countries. However, the capability to do so may not always be available within these countries, and consequently, foreign assistance is often required. Unfortunately, due to the lack of sustainable alternatives, some nations have landed up in unviable projects with limited local participation and huge financial liability. We also see an overall deficit in the gross maritime security capacity amongst the nations of Indo-Pacific. The shipping lanes of the region host a major share of international trade with concentration of maritime traffic through constricted choke points. In the first decade of this century, we all were witness as to how the lack of a robust maritime security apparatus led to increased piracy in the Gulf of Aden and North Arabian Sea. There is therefore a need to collectively invest in the capacity building of maritime forces of all nations in the region, big or small. Coupled with all these challenges is the unending threat of terrorism. Terrorism at sea and from the sea have all become common. The 26/11 attacks at Mumbai in 2008 and the recent attacks in Sri Lanka indicate use of seas for supporting, abetting, and undertaking terror operations. To address these diverse challenges and harness the potential of Indo-Pacific region, there is a need for countries to evolve collective solutions. The maritime domain, in particular, offers a wide array of opportunities for such efforts. Let me touch upon a few. First of all, inclusiveness and openness lie at the heart of a secure and prosperous Indo-Pacific. This requires us to evolve through dialogue, a common rule-based order for the region, built upon three pillars: respect for sovereignty and territorial integrity of each nation, equality of all countries, irrespective of size, and consent of all. With regard to to the gap between rising aspirations of a growing population and the available means, we need a financial support environment which offers credible and multiple alternatives for the recipient country. Certain fundamental mandatory attributes are necessary in this endeavor. For example, local participation is necessary for sustainable development. In addition, sound financial viability and equal benefit for the donor and recipient nations would prevent entrapment of smaller nations. Towards mitigating the deficit in maritime security capacity, it is imperative that all stakeholders work together to keep the growing maritime economic enterprise secure. In this regard, as the principal manifestation of India's maritime power, the Indian Navy task forces are continuously deployed in key parts of the region, mission ready to address a wide range of contingencies. In addition, we patrol the maritime zones of friendly nations on their request and also undertake coordinated patrols with some neighbors along our shared maritime boundaries. Capacity building and capability enhancement of our naval partners is an ongoing process and remains central in our bilateral engagements. The most visible aspect of this growing engagement are the exercises we conduct with our partners, both bilateral and multilateral. Our logistics sharing arrangements with several like-minded nations enables sustained, capable, and effective presence in the right place at the right time. Information sharing is central to our maritime security endeavors. Many of you would be aware that we have recently operationalized the Information Fusion Center for the Indian Ocean region. In short, we call it IFC-IOR. The venture would provide a high degree of shared maritime situational awareness to all our regional partners. The aim is to ensure that all emerging threats are identified early and the concerned agency is apprised in time to enable an effective response. Through a combination of independent and collective efforts, we seek to contribute to keeping the maritime domains of the region free and open for all. I conclude by quoting Prime Minister Modi's statement on Indo-Pacific. I quote, "India visions the Indo-Pacific as a free, open, and inclusive region which embraces all in the common pursuit of progress and prosperity." Unquote. Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen.
Thank you, Vice Admiral Jain. I'd now like to invite Rear Admiral Ali, the Coordinator of Expert Staff to the Chief of Indonesian Navy. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Tish. Mr. Minister, Chief of Australian Navy, Admiral Mike Noonan, distinguished speakers, participants, ladies and gentlemen, Assalamu alaikum and good afternoon. First of all, allow me to express my highest gratitude and appreciation to the Royal Australian Navy in hosting a very important and great event of Sea Power Conference 2019. It is an honor for me to speak at the 2019 Sea Power Conference representing the Chief of Indonesian Navy. This forum provides us great opportunity to share our ideas, thoughts, and perspectives. We all agree on the importance of the sea for our present and the future lives on this planet. Especially, most of us came from countries who belong to the great region of Indo-Pacific that is immensely dominated by the sea. Our sea is our future. The increasing trends of the use of the ocean are apparent in the last decades. Our ocean is not only utilized for traditional transportation medium that connected our land, it has been widely used and to some extent overly exploited to satisfy the world's enormous needs for energy, food, and influence or power. The abundance of our ocean is not limitless. Therefore, if we do not manage the oceans properly, we will bring disaster to humankind, especially to our children and grandchildren and the next generation. The UN General Assembly Resolution number 71312 dated 6th of July 2017, Our Ocean, Our Future, call for action stating that our ocean is critical to our shared future and common humanity in all its diversity. The main theme of today's conference is aptly selected by the Royal Australian Navy and properly phrased as the Indo-Pacific maritime domain in the 21st century, the spectrum of influence. Some posited that one way to use the sea as the medium of influence. I would argue that it is in our hand to decide on what kind of influence that we can make on the use of our ocean. The spectrum of influence in Indo-Pacific can be interpreted as a window of opportunity for the region to connect our needs and interests in two different areas of the Pacific and the Indian Oceans. This can be done through open dialogue and capacity building among states in the region that leads to cooperation and pursuit to a greater purpose of maintaining regional peace and stability. On the other hand, Indo-Pacific has the potential to become a theater of competing interests and influence among states. The ocean resources competition, excessive use of military means, and environmental destruction and deteriorates our degraded ocean health, which leads to a strategic distrust among nations. All this may trap us into the unnecessary spectrum of conflict. Indonesia, a maritime nation whose archipelago shapes like a ship, is naturally settled as a strategic gate between the Indian and the Pacific Ocean. This gate should be open, safe, and secure at all times. With our neighbors, we are committing our best effort to secure 4 vital sea lanes of communications in the region, namely Malacca Strait, Sunda Strait, Lombok Strait, and Makassar Strait. Since 2014, our leaders have aligned the national maritime vision to be the global maritime fulcrum. To achieve this ambition, we need to manage our maritime resources and cultivate a strong maritime culture into our people as the true backbone of maritime power. Indonesian thinking about ASEAN and Indo-Pacific can be derived from our President, Mr. Joko Widodo, Global Maritime Fulcrum Vision. The region provides unprecedented opportunity to implement the Global Maritime Fulcrum Strategy for Indonesia that is located in the center of Indo-Pacific region. The Foreign Minister official statements represent Indonesia's national gesture on maritime cooperation in the region. This also reflects the core foundation of Indonesia's free and active foreign policy. Last June, ASEAN members concluded one significant agreement portraying ASEAN view of Indo-Pacific. Basically, this is not legally binding agreement, but it recalls the ASEAN political instruments such as the ASEAN Charter, the Peace, Freedom and Neutral Zone, the Treaty of Friendship and ASEAN Cooperation, and the Southeast Asia Nuclear Weapon Free Zone, including UN Charter and other international legal principles. One of the main messages of ASEAN Outlook 2019 is the statement saying that the Indian Ocean is now an integrated part of Indo-Pacific. It's also a tangible effort of ASEAN countries to promote ASEAN leadership and role to contribute to the regional stability and security by mitigating any strategic threats and implementing the tenets of openness, inclusiveness, transparency, and common respect to the international norm. The 1945 Constitution primarily shapes Indonesia's strategy and policy in the region. At the last paragraph of its preamble, it is said that, pursuant to which, in order to form a government of the state of Indonesia that shall protect the whole people of Indonesia and the entire homeland of Indonesia, promote public welfare, develop the nation's intellectual life, and participate in managing the world order based on the principle of freedom, lasting peace, and social justice. These goals are our nation's long-standing framework that drives the making and practices of our foreign policy. There are 4 lines of effort that can describe where the Indonesian Navy will go in the future. The first, we are required to possess the ability to deter and combat actual threats such as terrorism, separatism, endemic disease, and natural disaster. We seek to have a balanced fleet that is able to play its role both in combat and non-combat operation. Second, the Navy needs to boost national maritime industries with a genuine purpose of advancing strong industrial-based support for naval development. This can be done by establishing a long-term strategy and policy support, designing legal and supporting market demand, as well as implementing innovative financing like holding company and blended financing. Next line of effort would be the empowerment of Navy people by investing long-term strategy to enhance the people knowledge and skill and utilizing smart training and education methodology. Last, the Navy realized that the naval science is vital to the naval system. Therefore, leveraging naval technology would be our future priority. The government, university, and industry unity like the triple helix concept is one good model. Application of technology on the use of clean energy such as biofuel is another quick win for technology advancement in the Navy. Ladies and gentlemen, on the conclusion of my brief, I would like to encourage all audience to reflect on our responsibility to save our future that is located in our ocean. As leaders, strategists, businessmen, policymakers, diplomats, and many other roles, we own a strong influence and lasting implication in the future. We should cooperatively manage the use of the sea as the spectrum of influence in the Indo-Pacific, not by and for power center purpose, but for a common interest of creating sustainable use of ocean while maintaining regional peace and stability and preserving our ocean as the irreplaceable and priceless heritage of humankind. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Rear Admiral Ali. Now I'd like to invite Rear Admiral Sato of the Japan's Maritime Self-Defence Force. Thank you, sir.
Distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, it's a great pleasure to meet you all today. I am Rear Admiral Sato, Director General of Operations and Plans Department, the Maritime Staff Office, the Japan Maritime Self-Defense Force. I'm honored to have the opportunity to give a speech about how Japan views the Indo-Pacific region. Needless to say, the Indo-Pacific region is very important, not only for Japan, but also the world. But very regrettably, I have to say we are in a challenging situation because the Indo-Pacific region is facing various challenges such as piracy, terrorism, and natural disasters. Under such circumstances, Japan aims to promote peace, stability, and prosperity across the region to make the Indo-Pacific free and open as international public goods through ensuring rules-based international order. This includes the rule of law, freedom of navigation and overflight, peaceful settlement of disputes, and promotion of free trade. Because of this, we strongly believe that we need to protect a free and open Indo-Pacific in cooperation with like-minded countries. This is Japan's overall views of the Indo-Pacific region. Next slide, please. We don't have a... I'd like to talk about how important the Indo-Pacific region for Japan and for the world is, and what JMSDF does for the region based on our free and open Indo-Pacific vision. The government of Japan advocates free and open Indo-Pacific vision as an overarching and comprehensive foreign policy in order to deal with the challenges in the vast area of Indo-Pacific oceans. The importance of the Pacific and Indian Ocean has been dramatically increasing in not only economic aspects, but also security ones. In addition to marine resources, seabed minerals, and hydrocarbons, there are huge quantities of proved and probable oil reserves in the East China Sea and South China Sea. Plus, there spread important slots for maritime trade. More than half of the world's merchant fleet tonnage passes from the Western Pacific to the Indian Ocean through South China Sea. Also, Indian Ocean is one of the most significant slots in the world, which connects Asia to Africa through Middle East. To protect our significant slots, Japan advocates the concept of free and open Indo-Pacific and is eager to spread the concept to the world and steadily obtain approval and cooperation from our like-minded countries. Free and open Indo-Pacific vision aims to create a place in the Indo-Pacific region that values freedom, the rule of law, and market economy being free from force and coercion. The fundamental concept is a key for stability and prosperity of the international community is dynamism that is created by combining two continents, which means Asia and Africa through Indo-Pacific oceans. The free and open Indo-Pacific vision is our strong determination that we will maintain and develop the free and open maritime order so that the Indo-Pacific can be a global commons which can bring stability and prosperity to any countries in the world without discrimination. For this purpose, we eagerly spread the importance of freedom of navigation and the rule of law and pursue economic prosperity by improving connectivity through high-quality infrastructure and open, transparent, and non-exclusive use of infrastructure. Other types of our efforts in the region are such as capacity building assistance, improving maritime law enforcement capability, and HADR. What I would like to emphasize is that securing free and transparent use of infrastructure is indispensable for stability and prosperity in the Indo-Pacific and beyond. We work together with other navies to improve the capacity of the regional countries for peace and stability. There are three main pillars for the effort. First, counter-piracy operation under the multinational task force. Second, conduct bilateral or multilateral exercise in the Indo-Pacific Ocean. Joint exercises are an effective way to send a good message for better maritime security. As an ideal example, Japan, Australia, United States trilateral joint exercise, Talisman Sabre 2019 was conducted here in Australia with great success, which I believe contributed to a better maritime stability in the region. Finally, we seek to find efficient ways to help build the capacity of coastal countries through holding various kinds of seminars and supporting ISR capability improvement. Lastly, I will explain our annual Indo-Pacific deployment this year, conducted from April to July. Attendant units were led by Commander Escort Flotilla 1 and were composed of 3 ships, JS Izumo, JS Murasame, and JS Akebono. Each ship departed Japan in April, and after that, called on the Philippines, Vietnam, Malaysia, Singapore, and Brunei. The JMSDF conducted joint exercise in the Indo-Pacific region with regional armed forces to improve our tactical capability and advance our coordination with other navies. The JMSDF intends to contribute to the peace and stability of the region and enhance mutual trust among the participating countries. Incidentally, IPD is the first initiative for JMSDF to officially categorize our exercise aimed to improve the peace and stability in the region, not only to enhance our tactical skills. Also, for the first time, the JMSDF organized a multilateral transit of the South China Sea, together with ships from US Navy, Indian Navy, and Philippine Navy. I would say this is a turning point for JMSDF in promoting our multilateral cooperation with other navies. Here I conclude my presentation by expressing my resolve to continue to work closely with other navies to overcome various security challenges. As the international community faces a time of significant change, the Pacific and the Indian Ocean are fusing dynamically as a free, open, and prosperous sea. We, the JMSDF, will continue to work with friends and partners, as we have done so far, to realize free and open Indo-Pacific. Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, I think no finer example of the diversity and complexity of the Indo-Pacific than that highlighted by our six eminent and expert speakers to my right. Captain Tawaki highlighted the issue of climate change as a priority for his nation. Admiral Prazak pointed on security of trade. Admiral Aquilino mentioned several times the free and open Indo-Pacific. Vice Admiral Jane mentioned maritime terrorism. Admiral Wali rightly pointed out natural disaster. And Admiral Sato pinpointed piracy. But if that was the diversity which is challenging our region, the solutions were consistent in theme. We had trust, cooperation, partnerships, and inclusiveness. And I'll just ask all of you to ponder on those 4 points in the end as ways that the anchors and the stalwarts of the region believe that we could go about in solving the many issues facing the region. I'll now hand over to the Master of Ceremonies who will do the Q&A.
Thanks. Thank you, sir. If you haven't put your questions through yet, there's still a little bit of time. We have about 10 minutes for questions, so please use the Twitter or the app if there's any questions from the audience. No? I'm looking at the group in the middle. No questions yet? Nothing on the screen. Technology, it's a wonderful thing.
So, whilst you're doing that, so as the chair then, if there's, whilst we're waiting for the questions that come through on the app, there is a question on the app, but actually a pretty important one from a very important person, so I'm going to let you take charge of that one.
Right. Okay. From Admiral Radakin, First Sea Lord. How do you see the UK making its presence felt in the Indo-Pacific region into the short and medium-term future? Admiral
Who is that for?
Would you like me to repeat the question?
No, so I think...
Who is it for?
So it's a question from the First Sea Lord to the panel. So I think anyone can take a dig at that. He's obviously, 11 hours behind right now. So you may be a little bit bleary-eyed, but I would offer that question to anyone in the audience, in the panel.
Okay, I'll start. We work obviously extensively with the UK. The First Sea Lord working very hard to reinvigorate a aircraft carrier program of which we are deeply embedded with him. We'll continue to work that as the Queen Elizabeth continues its work up and to get up to speed. And then back to the First Sea Lord on where he would like to deploy that. I know he's targeting a deployment in FY21, and if he decides the Pacific is the right place to deploy, we will deploy together as partners. So that would be one example of the UK as a Pacific power and contributing with partnership with the many nations here in the Pacific.
Thank you, sir. Gentlemen, is there anybody else that would like to offer any comment on that question?
We had the occasion. I mentioned the fact that an LHA came to the Indo-Pacific region in 2016 and 2017. And we had the chance at that time to have UK hellos on board. And so this was a kind of an interaction in the region with the Royal Navy, which is very valuable to us.
Thank you, sir. A further question, I hope that answered the First Sea Lord's question. Another question for the panel. There is an argument that the vanishing point of law is amidst the anarchy of international relations. To accommodate this void of protocols, can this panel explain why interoperability is vital? So I think what suggesting there is certainly some differences of interpretation of the international law. So why is the interoperability so significant to the different nations in the panel?
Well, I'll start.
Okay, so
The interoperability of the nations is absolutely critical to respond to many things quickly. If I were to just look at the storm systems that blow through the region and the potential damage that it could apply, it would be very critical for nations to come to the rescue of others in a very fast manner. We don't have time to figure out how to talk on the radios, how we steam safely together, how our aircraft operate together in small spaces. And then you could scale that all the way to in time of crisis. So interoperability on a day-to-day basis, I will say that in my work with many of the partners here in the region, the perfect goal is to be able to come together at a moment's notice and quickly operate with effectiveness. And we work to do that each and every day.
In
Thanks,
fact,
Sir.
it has come out very loud and clear that maritime security is every country's concern, and we have to collaborate and work together. And if we have to work together, then interoperability becomes very, very important. And that's why I think it should be the mainstay for fighting against any maritime issue.
I think I do agree with my two colleagues, having experienced the tropical cyclone Winston in Fiji in 2016. I think interoperability when our brothers and sisters came in to aid Fiji during that time is key to our relationships, irrespective of the political situation. I think interoperability, especially with our navies, is very important. Understanding best practices,
Absolutely.
sharing ideas, and how best situations can be coordinated. And the fact is, it's all about saving lives, especially in HADR operations. Speaking from the region, I know the region is still very challenged during these trying times. For us, cyclone season is coming up, and we're not immune to these climate conditions, and I hope this will continue. Thank you.
Great.
I would add a few words on that. There was a time when interoperability was a question of techniques and a question of doctrines and a question of training and having weeks and months before being totally interoperable. When Admiral Aquilino was not in the Indo-Pacific region, he invented a concept, which is the plug and fight concept. We had several occasions to work together, and we had no time to adjust, no time to warm up, no time to train. We had just a few hours or a couple of days to conduct very complex joint operations, multinational operations, and in order to reach this plug and fight capability, it requires a permanent effort from our navies going at sea, trying to do the most complex exercise almost all the time. Because we may have the same techniques, but we don't have time.
In my opinion, in establishing the peaceful and stability in the region, I agree with the Minister of Defense, Australian Minister of Defense. Partnership is very important. Partnership with other maritime stakeholders, other countries. We have a good experience in Malacca Strait. A long time ago, the Malacca Strait, well known as most dangerous waters in the world. but now reduced because of the cooperation in the region, in the Southeast Asia, with the Malaysian, with the Singapore, and with the Thai. We have MSSP, Malacca Strait Sea Patrol, Eye in the Sky. Thank you.
Thank you.
I will answer the question using my interpreter. インターオペラビリティの重要性というのは論を待たないと思います。
As other panelists said, the importance of interoperability is very important.
先ほど他国のアドミラルが言われたように、ただそのインターオペラビリティを高めるというのは非常に難しい問題でもあります。
Saying that interoperability is important is easier, but actually enhancing our interoperability has some challenges and difficulties.
私のスピーチで言ったように、海上自衛隊は毎年1回我が国からインド洋にかけての訓練をやっております。
So, as I showed in my speech, we conduct the annual Indo-Pacific deployment to the Indo-Pacific region.
この情報を前もって各国に知らせることによって、各国がこの訓練に、日本との訓練に参加して、各国とのインターオペラビリティが向上する機会を提供したいと思います。
So, we, the GMSDF, intends to have other nations participate in this, in our deployment, while providing information in advance to other nations.
So there was another part of the question which was buried in the app here, and it spoke about the vanishing point of law on the high seas and therefore the unequal nature of what we do. But I would argue that the Indo-Pacific in a number of years, particularly with WPNS and IONS, has established codes of conduct on the way that we do and expect to operate on the high seas, and that I think that we are actually, from a regional perspective, quite mature. Of course, the challenge is to ensure that everyone operates along those codes of conduct. We are now really at the end of the Q&A. Can I thank and deeply thank our 6 great speakers, highly intelligent, masters of the maritime domain, experts regionally, and the views that each of you put across there, sirs, was, I think, really thought-provoking for all of us and for Pacific and Sea Power. I thank you for the great distances you have travelled. I wish you a safe return journey for those that are leaving shortly. For those that are staying, I wish you a very fruitful Sea Power. So please, everyone, join me in thanking our 6 speakers.